Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 11 2025 NFL predictions. Well, for the Fanatic this week, it was another average, typical week, as I've had over the last several weeks. But this is the great thing about the NFL, man. Every week is a different week in terms of joy or outcomes or different changes and the variety of outcomes. Like if you were going to tell me, this past week or yesterday, hey, the Buffalo Bills, after beating the Chiefs for the 5th straight time in the regular season, are going to go down to Miami and lay an absolute egg against the Miami Dolphins. Well, I think Josh Allen's only lost one time throughout his, professional career. And you're going to have Devon Achane go for 170 yards. They can't even objectively, move the ball effectively. Keon Coleman gets one big reception. If you were going to tell me that was going to happen this weekend, if you were going to tell me that with New Orleans, Carolina, the Carolina Panthers, after having the biggest win in recent franchise history against the against the Green Bay Packers on the road, they're going to copy that up, or they're going to follow that up by playing New Orleans Saints and Tyler Shugg's second career start and lose in just inept fashion. If you were going to tell me that the Houston Texans were going to perform the second largest comeback in their franchise history, and they had a 19-point, they came back 19 points, and the worst part was, if it wasn't for Trevor Lawrence throwing that horrendous pick six at the end of the game to Sheldon Rankins, I could have, at least won that game on the spread because I took Jacksonville plus 1.5. Also, by the way, that was how I lost the Colts-Falcons game, where I had the Falcons plus 5.5, and the Colts, after the Falcons drive down the field and not give anything, they decide to, go for the touchdown. Congratulations, but that screwed me out of another spread pick. So that's all the crazy stuff that happened this week that made this week so terrible, or just kind of average or below average in regard so far. But that's just how sports is. That's why the NFL is so great and frustrating when you pick it, because you never know on a given week what exactly is going to happen. But overall for the week from last week, and I do want to remind everybody, I did take the Philadelphia Eagles tonight plus 2.5 over the Green Bay Packers on at home tonight for Monday Night Football. But last week, though, against the spread so far, I went 5-8 against the spread, straight up 7-6. Again, the only two games that I genuinely regret in terms of picking was New England and Tampa Bay. I told myself last week that I was probably going to lean towards New England, but the way New England played, Tampa was coming off a bye. I thought maybe they would get Bucky and Godwin back. They did not. I still thought Baker was going to be able to play well enough. But the Pats defense and Travion Henderson having two huge 50-yard runs, along with the Kyle Williams 73-plus yard score, that really was the difference, in my opinion, to how the Patriots were able to win, but kudos to them. Huge 7-game win streak over the last couple years. They only won 8 games the previous 2 years combined. They are now 8-2 this year and are riding a 7-game win streak, tied with the Broncos right now for the longest active streak in the league. So, excuse me. But that one, and then Steelers-Chargers, where I knew objectively the Chargers were the better team holistically, even with the injuries, but I tried to bank on myself saying, hey, the offensive line for the Chargers are going to be down Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, who was already out for the year. I honestly thought the Steelers, and they got 4 sacks on Justin Herbert. And if you watch that game, objectively, that was more on the Steelers' offense. That was the worst the Steelers' offense had looked the entire year so far. And that was the worst thing for me because I had DK Metcalf in fantasy. So he ends up getting 3 receptions of 35 yards. Nobody else really does anything. Jalen Warren probably has the best overall game. Aaron Rodgers throws for about a little over 100 yards and 1 TD and 2 picks. But the defense basically held the Chargers to 15 points until the big long reception to Ladd McConkey. So, in that way, that was what I didn't expect. The Steelers defense, I thought, played a admirable job for majority of the game. They couldn't get the Chargers off the field because they had a 50-minute time differential. But, so those are 2 picks that if I had to pick back or really think about it, those are the 2 that I regret because I knew the other team had a good chance to win, and that was my original pick going into the week before the injuries happened. And then, but now overall for the year through 148 or 84, through 148 games, I'm now 64, 83, and 1 against the spread, and now I'm 95, 52, and 1 straight up. So that equals 43.6% against the spread. Straight up, 95, 52, and 1 equals 64.5%. So, unfortunately, I'm going still in the wrong direction with regards to my predictions there. But my goal is to at least try to have winning weeks. I probably won't get to a 500 record against the spread. That's always my goal every year when I do betting picks. Straight up, I'm going to try to go, for 67, 68. I'm actually below usually my yearly average for this time of year when I do these. So my goals, I unfortunately I do have to shrink them a bit just due to how the year's going and the expectation. But I am going to hope for that with, 7 or 8 weeks to go, I can turn it around and have a great ending run for the year. The buys for this week, it's a 15-game week, so we have an extra game, which is always fun. So only the Colts and the Saints are on bye. So if you have Daniel Jones, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Colts defense, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, Blake Groupie, if you have any of those players on your fantasy teams, bench them because they will not be playing this week. Alright, so time for my predictions for this week. So on Thursday, when the 2-7 New York Jets travel to New England to take on the 8-2 New England Patriots, the New England Patriots are 10.5-point favorites in this game. Give me New England here minus 10.5, and New England straight up. Then the next game, the final international game of the year, when the 3-7 Washington Commanders travel to Miami in Madrid to take on the 3-7 Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are 2-point favorites in this game. Give me Miami here minus 2 and Miami straight up. Then the next game, in one of the most awkward games to pick for the entire year, when the 5-5 Carolina Panthers travel to Atlanta to take on the 3-6 Atlanta Falcons. Two teams that, objectively, you never know on a given week how they're going to play. If they're really good, if they're really bad. The Panthers can have gritty, grind-out wins, but then really pathetic, inept losses. And then the Falcons, what they do is they'll play down to their competition and lose games they shouldn't in sad ways, and then they'll play up to their competition and either win or look competitive in games that nobody thinks that they should be. But in this game, Atlanta is a 3.5-point favorite. I am going to take Carolina here plus 3.5, but I'm going to take Atlanta here straight up. I think it is that much of a hedge. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if either team won. I honestly think for both these fan bases, it's going to be what team is going to allow the other team to win by some odd way. But I'm going to take the Falcons here at home in this regard, and I'll explain that here in a bit later. But that's why I like Atlanta here straight up, but Carolina plus 3.5. The next game, when the 6-3 Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to Buffalo, they're going to be 6-3 Buffalo Bills. In the AFC equivalent, the AFC game of the week, or one of the big 3 games of the week, in my opinion. The Buffalo Bills are 5.5-point favorites in this game. With what I saw yesterday, kind of the same thing, to where I don't know if the Bucs are going to be fully healthy. But I'm going to take Tampa Bay here plus 5.5. But I'm going to take Buffalo here straight up. Then the next game, when the 4-5 Houston Texans travel to Tennessee to take on the 1-8 Tennessee Titans. The Houston Texans are 7-point favorites in this game. Regardless of C.J. Stroud or Davis Mills start, I'm going to take Houston here minus 7 and Houston straight up. Then the next game, when the 6-3 Chicago Bears travel to Minnesota, taking the 4-5 Minnesota Vikings. The Chicago Bears are 3-point underdogs in this game. And I think that is a little bit of a surprise just for how the Vikings have played recently. I know the Bears haven't been great. They've had a couple fourth-quarter comebacks. They had a big fourth-quarter comeback yesterday against the Giants. But in this game, I'm going to take Chicago here in a slight upset. So give me Chicago here plus 3 and Chicago straight up. Then the next game, when the 5-3-1 or 6-2-1 Green Bay Packers travel to New York to take on the 2-8 New York Giants. The Green Bay Packers are 8.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Green Bay here minus 8.5 and Green Bay straight up. The next game in an AFC North battle, when the 3-6 Cincinnati Bengals travel to Pittsburgh to take on the 5-4 Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers are 5.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Cincinnati here plus 5.5. For the third time this video, I'm going to hedge my bet here. I'll take Cincinnati here plus 5.5, but Pittsburgh straight up. Then the next game, when the 7-3 Los Angeles Chargers travel to Jacksonville to take on the 5-4 Jacksonville Jaguars. The Los Angeles Chargers are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Los Angeles Chargers here minus 2.5, and the Los Angeles Chargers straight up. Then the next game, in the big NFC game of the weekend, one of my favorite game of the entire weekend, when the 7-2 Los Angeles Rams host the 7-2 Seattle Seahawks. These Los Angeles Rams are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Los Angeles here minus 2.5, and Los Angeles straight up. Then the next game, in the other NFC West battle, when the 6-4 San Francisco 49ers travel to Arizona to take on the 3-6 Arizona Cardinals. The San Francisco 49ers are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me San Francisco here minus 3, and San Francisco straight up. Then the next game, in an AFC North battle, when the 4-5 Baltimore Ravens travel to Cleveland to take on the 2-7 Cleveland Browns. The Baltimore Ravens are 8.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Baltimore here to win straight up, but I'm going to take Cleveland plus 8.5. Then the next game, in a big AFC West battle, in the third biggest game of the week, when you have the 5-4 Kansas City Chiefs travel to Denver to take on the 8-2 Denver Broncos. The Kansas City Chiefs are 3.5-point favorites in this game. I am very surprised that through the ups and downs of Kansas City and how consistent Denver has been, at least defensively, I am surprised the Chiefs are 3.5-point favorites on the road in this big divisional game, where the Broncos, I believe, have won 10 or 11 straight home games, even with all Bo Nix's struggles. But I do think Andy Reid, one of the better coaches off a bye. I'm going to take Kansas City or minus 3.5, and Kansas City straight up. Then the next game, the Sunday night game, in the originally planned NFC Championship game, when the 6-3 Detroit Lions travel to Philadelphia to take on the 7-2 or 6-3 Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are 1.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Philadelphia here minus 1.5, and Philadelphia straight up. And lastly, in the Monday night game, in one of the offensive weird paloozas, when the 3-5-1 Dallas Cowboys travel to Las Vegas to take on the 2-7 Las Vegas Raiders. The Dallas Cowboys are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me Dallas here minus 3, and Dallas straight up. All right, it's time for my quick thoughts on each game. The New England Patriots over the New York Jets. I want to say, the Jets-Browns game was a incredibly unique game to watch, if you watched any of it like I did. The New York Jets offense, Justin Fields sucks eggs. Okay? He was inept. They had scored 2 touchdowns at, majority of the game, and he had thrown for 1 passing yard. He had thrown for 1 passing yard through a majority of the game. He basically had a big screen pass to Breece Hall, who was basically the entire offense the entire day. Also, best wishes to Garrett Wilson. He seemed to re-aggravate that knee injury during the game. But the New York Jets, just objectively, if it wasn't for their special teams coordinator gets the game ball for basically winning the game, they won a game also because of just the Cleveland Browns' ineptitude on defense, where you had a defensive holding on a 3rd down. They gave the Jets a free first down in the last drive of the game. And then a jumping or an encroachment. Back-to-back defensive penalties on 3rd down gave the Jets the win. Kudos to the Jets. It's been a very long time. I think it's been over a year since they won back-to-back football games. But my goodness, is that a terrible team to watch. And it's just look, when you look at the Patriots, who objectively I think had their biggest win, or, one of their, biggest wins in the last 4 or 5 years, beating Tampa Bay on the road. Drake May played a very good game. 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. I mentioned the Kyle Williams touchdown earlier. Travion Henderson had 2 huge 50-yard runs. The Patriots play, the Patriots, in my opinion, right now, outside of the Chiefs, and you could say, objectively, that's not fair to give the Chiefs that much credit, for this year, because the Patriots have played consistently better and, just a higher level compared to the Chiefs. But I think the New England Patriots are the second best team in the AFC. They have earned that. Drake's played fantastic. Mike Vrabel's coached up the defense incredibly well. And that team, I think, can actually probably provide the biggest challenge to the Chiefs in getting, to another Super Bowl. But I just think in this game, the Patriots have owned the Jets for years pretty consistently. And I think this Pats team, they're just healthier. No Garrett Wilson. is going to mean that Justin Fields is going to have literally no offense to throw to. They have one of the better run defenses. I don't think they said no Bucks running back is at no running back is at over 50 yards on this run defense. It's a home game. Aaron Glenn doesn't know who his quarterback is going to be. I just heard that before I started recording. And I think again, like the Patriots, they have now a nice easy stretch of games. I think they play the Bengals and the Giants, and then they have their bye and they play Buffalo. But once they play Buffalo and Baltimore again, that's where the Patriots will definitively show. And even though I know they already beat Buffalo on the road, but I think New England is gonna, New England has come all the way back to where if you're a Bills fan, it's now not you owning the division like you've had the past 5 years. I do think it is now a 2-horse race between the Bills and Pats for division dominance. And if I had to pick a team and an organization to go with, I'd go with the Pats moving forward. Just because I trust that structure. I think it's a better constructed roster, better coaches, and I think Drake is, taking a great leap. That Drake and Allen at this point are playing about even at least this year, and who knows if Drake can supersede Allen moving forward. But this game is fairly easy. The Pats just routinely own the Jets, and I just think the Jets, where again, Aaron Glenn, much to my chagrin, has been able to keep his job. This is the game where I feel like Justin Fields, for all the positive momentum and getting the back-to-back wins, this should be his last start because I just think he has not been that good enough to justify him continuing. And the Jets, they already have their wins. I just need to put a better option out there at Tyrod for this game. So, but that's why I like New England here, minus 10.5, and New England straight up. The next game, the Miami Dolphins over the Washington Commanders. This is a game where it's, weirdly enough, I think basically an even-based game to where, Mariota and Tua, they've had some nice moments and bad moments. Tua's leading the league in interceptions. He threw two, but it's just where when you look at this game, the international crowd's going to make it a neutral site. And when I just look at this game, the Commanders and the Dolphins, I'm going to go just a couple reasons here. The Dolphins have a little bit more momentum, and I think the Dolphins have a little bit of a healthier defense compared to the Commanders. That Commanders defense is grade A Swiss cheese. Everybody can run and throw and move the ball at will on that defense. And you had the big news today, obviously justified, where Deron Payne, the Washington star defensive tackle, is out this game due to a one-game suspension after punching Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I just think for the Dolphins, it's kind of where it's a confidence boost. To where, I feel like the Dolphins, to Mike McDaniel's credit, they're a bad football team, and I would not keep him regardless. But you could look at the Dolphins and go, hey, they played the Bills in a pretty tough game. They held James Cook to about 50 yards. He fumbled the ball. Josh Allen had 2 big turnovers. Mike McDaniel has not lost that team. And for the Commanders, it's just with Dan Quinn, it's you have this really old defense that's hammered without a lot of parts, but they're getting torched up and down every week, and you're a defensive coach. And it's just where, could Mariota and Tua, play each other evenly? Sure. Could Terry McLaurin be a huge factor and get the Commanders a win? Sure. But I just think in this type of game, after what I've seen, the Dolphins have a little bit more confidence. The Dolphins have a little bit of a better quarterback. The Dolphins have a little bit more weapons. And I think the Dolphins have a little bit more of a positive energy going into an international game that, I just think the Commanders have right now. The Commanders aren't going to have Deron Payne. That, with Devon Achane going for as many yards as he has, I think the Dolphins kind of win this shootout, in a neutral site. Could the Commanders win? Sure. But I just think the Dolphins have more confidence. They're healthier defensively. And I just think they have better momentum than the Commanders. And I do want to say this, everybody, Jaden Daniels, and people may not like this opinion. I saw Dan Graziano's stuff earlier today. He shouldn't play the rest of the year. This Commanders team is terrible. They're going to be, even if they lose to the Dolphins, they still have to play, the Cowboys again. They have to play the Eagles twice. This is going to be a 10-11 loss team. And with Jaden Daniels already suffering 4 injuries throughout the year in different ways, there's just no way that I'm putting Jaden Daniels back onto the field in a lost season for the Commanders. It's disappointing for Commanders fans because you objectively thought that, hey, maybe you could build the momentum. But I feel very much like the Texans, to where I think for Commanders fans. Now you have to basically reset a bit and change your perception and your expectation moving forward for the franchise. I don't think you have to, a complete rebuild to start at the bottom, but definitely now maybe that Super Bowl aspiration has to be capped down to like a second round exit for the team. So should be a good game. Two equally bad teams. A negative and a negative is positive. So I think it's gonna be an entertaining game. I'm gonna take the Dolphins here. Just a little bit more momentum. Better coached, and I just think Tua is gonna play a bit better. And I think the Commanders' defense is just a little bit weaker and more injury and suspension based than the Dolphins. So that's all like Miami here, -2. Miami straight up. The next game, the Atlanta Falcons over the Carolina Panthers. This game to me comes down to I'm just going to trust Atlanta with their talent. Honestly, this game, I honestly am not going to be surprised either way, whatever team wins this game. Because the Panthers have shown you gritty, tough wins, during the year before, but they've also shown you inept, pathetic losses. This is basically where you're watching two teams where you could argue the coaching staff in Carolina is uplifting or pushing a roster of talent that's, below their skill level to at least a 500 record and a arguable contention shot for a wild card spot. Where you look at the Falcons coaching staff, maybe besides Jeff Ulbrich, where you look at the Falcons and go, their coaching staff is hindering and lowering. They are underachieving with a Falcon roster that has a good amount of talent on it. But again, Carolina, just watching Bryce Young, that was just such an inept defensive performance. Rico only having 49 yards. They let Tyler Shug throw for 280 and 2 touchdowns. Chris Olave had a big 60-plus yard score. This game is just so awkward and bad, and you don't know who's really going to win. And if I took Carolina, I get it, But the only thing that I'm going to trust Atlanta for two reasons. One, they're at home, and they just played better, and hopefully they can carry that momentum. But it's Atlanta, so every time you pick them to win, they'll lose, and every time you pick them to lose, they'll be competitive or win. And I just think, again, Atlanta has the motivation of they got their rear ends kicked in week 3 by this Panther team on the road, 30-0. And I hope they would take it out on this Panther team that's coming off a really terrible loss. But, again, Carolina, Atlanta, I think Atlanta's at home. They have more talent around them. And I just think they need to be able to say with, confidence that, we can beat a football team. We just played two teams that are combined, 8-2, and the Colts are, they're combined 16-4 to a margin of 7 points. And we lost by 3.5 points per game against those two great teams. But we somehow lost to the Panthers, and we lost to the Niners. That's the weird thing about the Falcons I just don't get. But I think the Falcons, because they're home, I think they have more talent, and I just think the Falcons have to have some motivation to say, we can close a game. I think they will against Carolina. Maybe. But I'm going to take Carolina here plus 3.5 because I think it's an objective hedge. So, but that's Atlanta here straight up, but Carolina plus 3.5. The next game, the Buffalo Bills over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This game, again, it's also, it's a better version of Carolina-Atlanta to where I'm going to take Buffalo here based on Tampa Bay's injury problems. I don't know if Bucky and Chris are going to be able to play. Mike's already out. The offensive line did okay. I guess I will acknowledge that Rashad White and Sean Tucker should have great games against the very porous Bills run defense. And Baker's played well. But I also just think the Bills, the reason why I'm going with the Bills is this is a flashpoint moment for the Bills season. Okay? I thought objectively the Bills were going to the Super Bowl. And they've had wins, and they've had dominant moments. They were 4-0, and now they're 2-3 in their last 5 games, with 2 of those 3 losses coming against New England, which I guess isn't terrible, but 2 of those 3 losses coming against the Falcons and the Dolphins in games that were not particularly close. Josh Allen has, turned more back into an unfortunate turnover machine. They really have no legitimate wide receiver at all, besides Khalil Shakur, which can go up and down. But the reason why I'm going with Buffalo here is Buffalo is at home, and I think they have to respond. if the Buffalo Bills are as any legitimate threat to the Super Bowl as I think they can be, they have to win this game. Because if you lose to Tampa at 6-4 with the record you have and the games you played, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think it's, objectively fair. The Bills are on fraud alert. 6-4. Look at the wins they have. And you can say, well, the Ravens game, the Ravens and Chiefs, sure. You beat those teams, but you lost to the Dolphins. You lost to the Falcons. Like the way this 6-4 year is going, and just you shouldn't be in this position. It's just been very sloppy, turnover based, and I just think the Bills' lack of dynamic weapons outside of tight end might be the biggest reason why they don't move forward. And I just think, again, Buffalo knows who they are. And Tampa, look, if Tampa was fully healthy and the Bills were in their current shape, I'd take Tampa, in a heartbeat. And I still and again, I think this game is so close, just like Carolina and Atlanta, I'm going to take Tampa with the 5.5. I think Baker played incredibly well against the Pats defense. I think the Pats defense just came up huge with a couple big sacks to stop the momentum for the Tampa Bay offense to win. But again, Buffalo here, they're at home. I think they will have a great, they have a hard week of practice. I think the way the way Trey Van Henderson was able to run, I think James Cook can have that similar type of effect. And I just think the Bills need to respond in a way where I think they're healthier than what the Bucs are. And I think the Bills defense, even though, again, the run game has been their issue, I don't know if Tampa can respond with White and Tucker as their main backs. Should be a fantastic game. And just like that, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Tampa Bay won this game. But I'm going to take Buffalo here, healthier team. And I just think they need this win to help prove and help move along their case to make the Super Bowl. Tampa, if they lose, they're going to fall to Tampa's going to fall to 6-4. If Carolina, even if Carolina wins, it's 6-4, 6-5, so they're still going to be leading the South. And Tampa should comfortably win that division regardless. But for Buffalo, it's you are, on the verge of a fraud if you lose this game. And I think Buffalo, with how bad they played, I think they're going to come out this Sunday and have a very good, solid game to beat Tampa. And a good quality win. So, that's Buffalo straight up at Tampa Bay plus 5.5. The next game, the Houston Texans over the Tennessee Titans. This one's fairly easy. To me, the Tennessee Titans are the worst team in football. They're coming off a bye, and they're playing a Texan team that just had one of their most energetic, come from behind, season-saving wins in franchise, for the comeback in franchise history. For this season, it might have saved their year that they still could fight for a wild card spot. They're not winning the division. The Colts are, I think just have been playing better. They have more talent. They're healthier. But when it just comes to the Texans, I think, again, that they blew out, even though, again, to be fair, the last time they played them, it was an ugly, awkward game. The Titans, put up a good fight through the first half. It was 6-0 through the first half. They ended up scoring 20 points in the second half to blow them out. I think this Houston defense is going to just smother Cam Ward once again. The Titans really didn't add any other weapons. They lost Draymond Jones. They lost Roger McCreary. This Titans team is weaker because they know how bad they are, and they're not really trying to win. And I just think after what Davis Mills did in the fourth quarter, and I'm not saying that Davis Mills is going to put up that type of performance again, but I think Davis Mills, if he just doesn't turn the ball over with how good that defense is, and if he just hits Nico and Jalen Noel and Higgins and Dalton Schultz enough times, they should be able to beat a Titan team that has objectively been the worst team in football. So, if Davis Mills was going to get blown out, I might have taken Tennessee, on the spread. But just knowing how bad the Titans have been, I just think the Texans, even if Davis Mills just threw dink and dunks and checkdowns, I was like, okay, as long as Davis Mills doesn't turn the ball over, I think the Texans would have won the game. But I might have taken the Titans plus 7. But after that performance I saw with the 26-point fourth quarter, I have to take the Texans here minus 7. Just because I feel like Davis has some confidence, and I just think the Texans, are building some momentum that, at 5-5 through 10 games, they're probably, they're out of the division race, but they can maybe convince themselves that they might be able to make the playoffs. So that's why I like Houston here minus 7 and Houston straight up. The next game, the Chicago Bears over the Minnesota Vikings. This one to me comes down to, I think the Bears offensively are a much better offensive team than they were in week 1. And for the Vikings, where they've been healthier, where they've played better, you've seen improvement and consistency from Caleb Williams and the Bears offense. They have a top 10 offense in terms of passing and rushing. Caleb Williams has 4 fourth-quarter comebacks. Again, you might not be impressed with, having to beat the Raiders on a fourth-quarter comeback, the Giants on a fourth-quarter comeback, the Bengals on a fourth-quarter comeback, and after the other team. But the Bears are just playing more consistent offensive football. Monangai and Swift are a good running back combo. Caleb was using his legs. And I just look at the Vikings and go, look, the Vikings defense is doing everything it can. But J.J. McCarthy, and this is for Mundia and KOC, whose job should be on the line, by the way, they made a mistake. J.J. McCarthy, and as someone that thought J.J. McCarthy could have been better than Drake May, I was dead wrong about that. So, I'll admit, where Matt the Fanatic was wrong, J.J. McCarthy being better than Drake May, that probably will never happen at this point. But J.J.'s just consistently showing he's not improving enough with the talent around him. He threw over 40 times and threw for about $190. He had 2 horrible interceptions that were just gifts to the Ravens secondary. But, and again, look, I understand, this Vikings defense in week 1 gave Caleb Williams fits, and it still might give him fits. But I just think with how Ben has been able to adjust the offense, how the Bears defense, it hasn't been great, and to be fair, it could be more of a weird shootout. But after, I guess, you're seeing the growth from week 1 to week 11, 10 weeks later, I've seen Caleb Williams play better. I expect him maybe to use his legs and play better against the Brian Flores defense. With JJ, it's just I don't know if he is going to play better. It's going to be an indoor stadium, which will be, an advantage there. But I objectively think with this Bears-Vikings team, I'm going to think the Bears have shown consistent improvement, especially from Caleb, from the quarterback position. And I get how bad the Bears defense is, so JJ should, could have more of an opportunity. Look, he scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter in week 1. But I just think the thing where I've seen Caleb improve, but I think the Bears defense can find its opportunities or turnovers and get a few stops to where Caleb won't be in those situations or make nearly as bad throws or decisions. I don't know if JJ's improved from that enough to win this game in this current context. Should be a great game. I am a little surprised because the Bears' momentum, winning 6 of the last 7 games, even though, it hasn't been pretty or consistent, that they are 3-point dogs to Minnesota. But I think Chicago, again, playing better offensively. Really like what Caleb's been doing, and I think that defense should be able to hold enough if JJ makes a few mistakes for the Bears to win. So, but that's like Chicago +3 and Chicago straight up. The next game, the Green Bay Packers over the New York Giants. The New York Giants, they have now won 4 fourth-quarter double-digit leads. Or 4 fourth-quarter leads. I believe they've won 3 fourth-quarter double-digit leads. Brian Daboll sucks. Okay? And look, I know that for all the Giant fans out there, it's oh, look at what he's done with Jackson Dart. Yeah, Jackson Dart, yay! And again, Jackson Dart has played well. He's actually provided that spark that Sean Payton tried to say that Jared Stidham would have done 2 years ago when he benched Russell Wilson. But, pot shot or not. But, Brian Daboll just sucks, okay? Jackson Dart, if Brian Daboll is that big of a crutch to Jackson Dart, then Jackson Dart has to suck. Because that guy is not a good coach. And the Giants, just in this situation, and again, Jackson Dart, and the way Jackson Dart's playing the game, he's already suffered, he's already been in the tent 4 times this year for 4 concussions, or 4 possible concussions. He finally got concussed this last time, but the way Brian Daboll is treating this kid, he's basically treating him as this, ragdoll or this crash test dummy that's, going to get him killed, and it's, ruining the development. It's ruining the growth. And it's just, whenever you see the Giants fold in a big spot, and again, Russ did not help any favors, though, again, Russ was in relief, though he did have a nice 40-plus yard pass to Singletary. The Giants are just so bad that I don't think Brian Daboll is going to kneecap Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart might be a sub-mid quarterback the rest of his time with the Giants if Brian Daboll is still the coach of this team. Okay? And look, I think just because the reason why I'm not really talking about this game as much as the Packers, regardless of what happens in Philadelphia, I even think, here's how bad it is. I think Malik Willis, with that Packers construction, even currently just, even without Tucker and Jaden and Golden having injuries, I think Malik Willis, if Jordan Love went down of an injury, I think the Packers could still win the game. I don't know if I take the 8.5 points. But I like the Packers in this game just for all, that variety of reasons. I think the Giants, are kind of in a sad state of, just not having a lot of hope, or they're in a bad, Falcons spot to where it's, it's not as sad. It's kind of admirable. Jackson Dart's played that well. He's been the best rookie quarterback of the whole class. But I'm going to take Green Bay here just because I think they're fundamentally just a overall better team. I think the Packers have routinely beat the Giants in MetLife over the past and I think they're mad from the last time, the Tommy DeVito game. I think the Packers that were there were pretty mad, and I'd use that as motivation to kick the tar out of the Giants this time around. And I think the Giants really also can't get that much of a pass rush. They haven't really all year. I think the Packers' offensive line should be able to hold up, and I think the Packers just go into MetLife and put a good curve stomping on the Giants. So that's Green Bay here minus 8.5, and Green Bay straight up. The next game, the Pittsburgh Steelers over Cincinnati Bengals. This one to me, and I know you could say, why are you going with Pittsburgh? I mean, after what you saw, look at what the Ravens' schedule is. It's to me, it just comes down to the Steelers being at home. And I think the Steelers should be able to outshoot the Bengals at home. Again, could the Bengals win this game? Sure. The last time we saw this game with Joe Flacco, he threw for 380 and 4 touchdowns and 2 picks. Jamar Chase had 16 receptions. We know, both defenses suck. And I'm just okay, I think Rodgers and them should be able to move the ball more at will against the weak Bengals secondary and defense. And I just think they're at home. Again, would I be surprised if the Bengals won this game? Not at all. I guess it just depends on if Rodgers is a turnover or they give one stop or another. But if both teams just go up and down the field at will with their current rosters, I have confidence in the Steelers to win this game by a last-second field goal or a last-second opportunity. But and I'm going to take the Bengals here just because I know the Steelers' defense maybe hasn't gotten that much better. I know that, the Bengals' offensive line, you're playing a more statue quarterback in Flacco compared to Herbert, who had a couple big runs. But I'm going to take the Steelers here just because they're at home, and I think the Steelers know that, this is a flashpoint moment for them in terms of trying to keep the Ravens at bay for the AFC North. And after just seeing what the Bengals have done the last 2 weeks, if they were able to beat the Jets and Bears and not have those inept collapses, I probably might have taken Cincinnati. It's okay, look, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, it's going to be a shootout, but the Bengals were able to win those shootouts. But just looking at the defense, I'm okay, do I trust Aaron Rodgers or Joe Flacco in a last-second spot, to win the game where you saw Caleb Williams throw a 50-yard touchdown pass with under 50 seconds to go? So, at the end of the day, I think this Bengals defense, how inept it is, and just the lack of confidence I have in the Bengals holistically, I think that the Steelers at home should be able to get this win. But I'm going to take Cincinnati here plus 5.5 because honestly, in a shootout, a high shootout game, those games really don't end in 7-point or higher margins. So, but that's Pittsburgh here straight up, and Cincinnati plus 5.5. The next game, the Los Angeles Chargers over the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to take the LA Chargers here based on the fact that I think the Jags, that was one of the worst collapses in Jaguars franchise history. And watching that game, the way they had played, they got 2 turnovers. And I do want to say, the Jags defense I still think is leading the league in forcing turnovers. That's fantastic. But objectively, that's 2009 Saints defense-esque. To where, if you really look at the rest of the Jags' defensive statistics, they're not a great defense. And even though they got a couple turnovers, if you're not turning the ball over, it's Pittsburgh-esque, to where it's that defense outside of turnovers is not very good. And I also think the other issue you have to have is, look, did they miss Brian Thomas? Sure. Did they miss Brian and Travis? Sure. I think Brian and Travis could have made it easier for them, but they were playing a backup quarterback. The Chargers, though, it's where, to me, it's that they just fundamentally have enough talent. Even though I know they lost their tight end. He already has an MRI on his knee today, which would be big for them. They should get Hampton back soon. I don't know if he's not going to come back this week. They might have him after the bye. But I think the Chargers, their defense has played sensationally. They've only allowed one touchdown over the last, I think, like 9 quarters. They've played great defense. They can run the ball effectively. I think Justin Herbert should have an easier time. If Davis Mills can lead a 19.4 quarter offense, Justin Herbert, even with the weapons he has, I think should be able to do similar, if not better, against the Jags defense that has been very explosive, play prone, and just very inept at tackling at times. Also, I do want to shout out real quick Keenan Allen. Yesterday he became the all-time leading reception leader for the Chargers, passing Antonio Gates, which is a mark I didn't think was possible to pass for the Chargers franchise. So shout out to Keenan Allen. But in this game, I thought if Jacksonville would have won and the Chargers would have lost, I would have said, okay, now we got a unique rematch here from the playoff game a couple years ago against Trevor and Justin. But this time around, I think Justin's got a much better team around. He's got a much better coach compared to Brandon Staley. And I just think for the Jags, where all that positive momentum was there for how their year had been, this might be the start of the downfall to where the Jags still might make the playoffs, but their feeling of confidence, especially in their quarterback, has to be dampered, especially by the way he's played. So that's like the Los Angeles Chargers here, -2.5, and the Los Angeles Chargers straight up. The next game, the Los Angeles Rams over the Seattle Seahawks. Man, do I love this game. You can have, Giants win the world. You can have all that. You can have your Chiefs Broncos. You can have your Lions Eagles. This is the game that I am most excited for this weekend. Seahawks at Rams. Look, the Seahawks, man, one of the best teams out there. I believe third best in the NFC definitively. Only the Rams and the Eagles are better in my opinion. But this team, man, plays defense hard. It tries to run the ball, effectively. Sam Darnold is playing the best football of his career. Mike McDonald is a disciplined coach. Like this Seattle team, the way, if you watch them play the Cardinals, and as they laid the wood and the belt and foghorn leghorned the Cardinals' rear ends for that entire game, is actually a beautiful thing to watch. As someone that defended Kyler Murray, I saw Jacoby Brissett got the job throughout the week. As someone that defended Kyler Murray, seeing Jacoby Brissett constantly on his rear end, it was just a beautiful thing to see. Because it showed me that, okay, all the Kyler, anti-Kyler people out there, he wasn't that big of a problem, or Jacoby wasn't that much better. Okay? Kyler, I thought, would have played a better game. Do I think they would have won? No. But I just think, when you look at Seattle, that is just a brilliantly coached team. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Seahawks won. But the reason why I'm going with the Rams is going to be with the experience, the home field advantage, and I just think Stafford, John Matthew Stafford, much to my chagrin, because I'm not the biggest Stafford guy, would be my MVP for the year. He has now tied an NFL record for 3 straight games of 4 passing touchdowns with no interceptions. Puka's been great. They've been able to run the ball. They put up 42 points on a Niners defense that was banged up, but they basically, had their way offensively at will. And I just think in the key moments in this game at home, I think Stafford will make 1 or 2 more plays that Darnold can't, or Darnold might make 1 or 2 mistakes that cost the Seahawks this game. If the Rams can't really generate the run, or Stafford makes a mistake himself, the Seahawks should easily win this game. I think it's just going to come down to better play and fewer mistakes. I know that's a cliche, but that's how I really look at this game. I think the Rams, with their experience, with Stafford, the way he's playing, I think Stafford has better depthed weapons compared to Seattle. I think the Rams have a better front 7 than Seattle. The secondary is I give Seattle the edge at secondary. So that is going to be interesting, especially with Devontae and Puka and Tyler Higbee and the other receivers they have. And Tutu Atwell. That might be the advantage Seattle will rely on the most, having the better secondary. But I just think the Rams with that defensive line going against that Seattle offensive line, I think Seattle's got a great chance, or the Rams have a good chance to win a big game and solidify themselves clearly as one of the top 2 teams in the NFC. If Seattle wins, Seattle takes that spot. So that's the Los Angeles Rams here -2.5, and the Los Angeles Rams straight up. The next game, the San Francisco 49ers over the Arizona they have played well. They have been consistent. And look, Arizona, at home, they played the Niners tough, week 3. That was a 16-15 game where it was A. Jones, and best wishes to him. It looks like he's torn his Achilles, so he'll be out the rest of the year. To me, it's like, when it comes down to this game, even with all the injuries that have happened on the offensive line, the defensive line, the linebackers, I think Brock Purdy coming back, and I just trust Kyle Shanahan to outcoach Jonathan Gannon. Like, the Niners are going to have a good year, but I think the issue is with all their injuries, you can give, and I still think Kyle Shanahan should be coach of the year for what he's had to go through to get to a 7-4 winning record of all those injuries. But the Niners are just basically going to be seen as a pretender team that objectively every team in the playoffs, maybe besides, even Tampa who beat them, like, they're the one team that made the playoffs due to the lack of schedule. What I would call them is they're basically like the new group of 5 or non-power or Big Ten or SEC conference champion, like that type of team. To where, like, you're going to make the playoffs probably just because of how easy and light your schedule is. But I just don't think anybody's going to believe in them just based on the injuries they have and just the consistency and just the lack of weapons they have because of that. So, but Arizona, look, can they be competitive? Sure. Do I think Jacoby will play better? Probably. But at the end of the day, you give me Kyle and Brock against Gannon and Jacoby Brissett with the rosters they have. It can be close and should be entertaining, but I'll take the Niners. Better coach team, more motivated. And usually when the Niners lose games, they don't really lose back-to-back games that often. I think the Niners will be focused, and they will get a nice, good win to get back on track before their next easy part of the schedule comes up before they play Indy here in a few weeks. So that's like San Francisco -3 and San Francisco straight up. The next game, the Baltimore Ravens over the Cleveland Browns. I am taking the Baltimore Ravens here based on the fact the Browns are just inept. Look, Cleveland, that defense can try everything they want. The Browns need to fire their special teams coach because he cost them the game. Like, Dylan Gabriel, and I'm not the biggest Dylan Gabriel guy, but it is time for Shedeur Sanders to start. But yesterday, that loss goes on 2 people. The special teams coordinator and Kevin Stefanski's idiotic self. Okay? Kevin Stefanski just needs to leave Cleveland. The guy's not a good coach. They can't win games. They lost to the Jets, for crying out loud, when they were on a bye. You let 2 special teams touchdowns win you the game where the quarterback threw for 60 yards. Like, Jim Schwartz is looking at Kevin Stefanski going like, what do you do? Why can't we move the ball offensively? And again, you can say, well, Gabriel's a quarterback. It's like, the other problem is, even if you don't believe Gabriel or like Gabriel or anything like that, he still keeps going to him. Like he's like pledged his loyalty to him, and I just don't get it. Because I'm not saying Shedeur Sanders is going to be the answer. But what people have seen from Dylan Gabriel is he's probably a mid-game manager at his ceiling. He's a below-average game manager on a good day. And I just think for Stefanski, that's going to be the thing that, is the cardinal, sin there. That's going to be the thing that gets him fired primarily. Is that, like, he just, after going with Joe and even trading Joe to Cincinnati, and then seeing Dylan, we've seen Dylan Gabriel enough. I don't think he's as bad as people think, and I think people have ragged on him too much, but he's just not, at his apex, he's a mid-level game manager on any given Sunday so far from what we've seen. He's a below-average game manager of the game. Game manager, for quarterback. And the Browns may not win another game. I'm not saying they're going to win games with Shedeur, but you want to see something different. And look, they're not going to do that. But I'm going to take the Ravens here because, again, the Ravens, since the Rams game, the Ravens have, won 3 of their last 4. They've won 3 straight, and they've held 4 straight opponents to under 20 points. So our defense is playing better. It's playing more consistently. Lamar, had another solid game. Derrick Henry ran for 70 yards. Tyler Loop had, a good 4-day kicking. And I just think, again, the Ravens, they can feel the momentum building. They can feel the consistency forming. And again, I think the Ravens, I would take them to win the North. I think they have a good chance to do it. But I'm going to say Cleveland here, plus 8.5 because of that defense. Ravens games on the road in Cleveland usually turn out to be pretty wonky and they end up being way more competitive because Myles Garrett just seems to wreck the game. But I just think if you look at who we're going up against, it's Dylan Gabriel. And Dylan Gabriel, is a weaker version of J.J. McCarthy. And I just think Dylan Gabriel is going to have a really tough time against our defense. Kyle and Marlon and Malachi making huge plays on a more limited Browns offense. I think Judkins is, the center of their offense. I don't think we're going to, let him run wild, even though, to be fair, throughout the year, the Ravens defense hasn't been great overall. But I just think, again, with how the Browns locker room is, the frustration, I think, again, the Browns are basically tanking to another terrible year where the Ravens are trying to build momentum to say, we can make the playoffs and maybe put ourselves back in a surprising role for the title. And I just think, again, the Ravens, they've been playing better. They have Lamar over Gabriel. Even if the Browns have a better defense, I just think that gap in quarterback play is good enough for the Ravens to win this game. Should be a good one. Ravens, Browns, and Cleveland always are kind of weird and wonky. But I'm going to take the Browns defense plus 8.5 because of the defense. But I just think Lamar with Derrick Henry and with the way that teams are playing, even without Bateman, the Ravens, I think, should win off those factors. So that's like Baltimore here straight up with Cleveland plus 8.5. The next game, the Kansas City Chiefs over the Denver Broncos. I'm going to take Kansas City here based on where Denver's offense has been so hard to watch throughout the year or throughout the last several weeks. Like, okay, when you watch the Broncos play the Texans 2 weeks ago, everybody was okay with the Broncos only putting up 18 points because it was the Houston defense. The fact you put up fewer points against the Raiders defense, which only has Max Crosby and really nobody else. Bo Nix only threw for like 150 yards. He had 2 more interceptions, even though they weren't his fault. Like, that's just so bad. And again, the Denver defense, that defense is kicking rear. Drinking beer and kicking rear, with how well they've been playing. I think I saw a stat on Thursday night or the next day. I think the Broncos over the last 2 years have at least over 30 more sacks than the next fewest team, and they could be on pace to break the all-time single-season sack record, which I believe is held by the 1984 Chicago Bears. So, this defense is balling. It is legit. And they've won 7 straight games. But it's just when you look at the Denver offense, even with J.K. Dobbins went down, to do a hip drop tackle, it's like, I look at this, Denver team and go, okay, if you want everybody to give you legitimacy, even with Bo Nix's inconsistency, beat the Chiefs at home. You have one of the longest home win streaks currently active, and the Chiefs are coming off a bye, and Andy Reid, the best coach ever on the history after a bye, they're trying to make a run for the division, and I think if they beat the Broncos with their other game, coming up, I think the Chiefs can be right back in this division race, especially with the Chargers losing both their tackles. And again, I just feel like the Chiefs, they're going to be rested, and they're going to be healthier. Hopefully they get Pacheco back with Kareem. And I think, again, like, the Chiefs, in this moment, I know Mahomes has lost in Denver before, but it's like, this Chiefs team feels different, and I just think the Broncos, the air has to pop out of the balloon for Bo Nix's below-average play over the last several weeks, and I think this is going to be the moment to where they get that opportunity. Also, I just think, for Bronco fans, there might be a little confidence saying the last time we played them, we shut them out 30-0 at home. But that was with Carson Wentz, the quarterback, not Mahomes. And the Chiefs are the more desperate team compared to you all. And I think the Chiefs are just playing a much better, consistent football compared to Denver over the last few weeks. So that's why Kansas City are minus 3.5. Kansas City straight up. The final 2 games, the Philadelphia Eagles over the Detroit Lions. This comes down to the Eagles having a bit of a better defense. Or the Eagles having a better defense. I think the offense is both ways. This was supposed to be the NFC title game last year if it wasn't for the Commanders and the Lions' comedy of errors and the Commanders' ability to capitalize on those comedy of errors to win. But I just think after what you've seen out of the Lions, yes, they've been able to dominate offensively for the most part. I think Jared Goff and Gibbs and Brown and Montgomery and Laporta, they will be able to score, I think, on the Eagles' defense. So you're going to feel like they have a good enough offensive line and get enough offensive firepower. I just think the Eagles secondary is a little bit better. And you told me who's going to make a mistake or who's more prone to make a mistake in this type of game with the way they've been playing, I'm going to trust the Eagles not to do that compared to the Lions with Jared Goff. I think this is going to be a fantastic game. I think this is going to be, very, Niners, Eagles-esque from the 22 NFC 23, to where Lions fans are going to feel very confident. It's like, we could have beaten you and got there. And again, I think they still can, but I just think the Eagles, adding the pass rush they have, having the better secondary, just having better receiver depth, and just Jared Goff and Jalen Hurts' history in big games, makes me side with the Eagles just based on rest, consistency, and I just trust the Eagles defense to make one or two more big plays than I do the line. So that's like Philadelphia, -1.5, Philadelphia straight up. And lastly, the Dallas Cowboys over the Las Vegas Raiders. Two bad inept teams, two terrible defenses. I think the Cowboys can outshoot the Raiders. Like, the Cardinals, like, they've had some good defensive moments. And, they've had moments, but it's like the Raiders just can't. And I just think, if they just pretty much triple team Brock Bowers, the Raiders have really no other offensive weapon to speak of. And if you're just telling me, if the Raiders, and again, I just don't think the Raiders defense is not that good. And I just think the Cowboys offense is much more potent and consistent than the Broncos offense is. And I just think the Cowboys, with a lot of Cowboy fans on the road, especially in Vegas, I think they go into Vegas and probably get their last big win of the year. I guess probably the Giants game or the Commanders game, to where the Cowboys' downfall starts next week when they host the Philadelphia Eagles. So, Cowboy fans, enjoy this moment now, because now the tough part and sad part of your year will begin moving forward, starting next week. So, that's like Dallas here, -3, and Dallas straight up. So, those are my picks, and those are my comments and picks for this week. Like, comment, rate, subscribe. Please check out the NFL YouTube Prognosticators page to see other great prognosticators like Andrew Warren, Geo Knows, Half Moon's Picks, Fire and Brim Sports, Sports Fan Entertainment, Sharon Knows Sports. She's a great NFL picker. She does little shorts, and all the other great prognosticators throughout the week. I do want to say real quickly, due to my work schedule, unfortunately the video for Week 12 will be coming out Wednesday, November 19th, because I have to work Monday and Tuesday. So the video for Week 12 will be coming out a bit later than usual on Wednesday, November 19th. So I just wanted to let that out there for all my viewers out there. So, good luck to all players, coaches, fellow prognosticators, and fantasy players. And until next Wednesday, this is Matt the Fanatic signing off. Until then, everyone, so long.